This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Emerging market stocks rallied today as hopes of an economic recovery and more stimulus helped investors look past the US-China trade tensions. MSCI's index of developing market shares rose about 1.3% on the day. In South Africa, investors at the JSE are seizing on even the slimmest good news. The market was firmer as optimism over a possible coronavirus vaccine lifted sentiment today. Over in Kenya, the NYSE 20 slipped as pandemic jitters redirect investors to its derivatives market. Also, we saw first quarter results from the banking sector trickling in. Equity Group has cancelled its proposed dividend payout. It's citing the need to conserve cash in the wake of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Now, also coming up on today's show. New York Stock Exchange trading floor opens after a 2-month closure. Egypt raises $5 billion in its largest ever bond issuance. And German carrier Lufthansa gets a €9 billion bailout from the government. Well, let's start the hour in the U.S., where the New York Stock Exchange is reopening its trading floor after a 2-month closure due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the exchange is likely to look and feel very different as new rules come into effect now. The NYSE is one of the few bourses to still feature floor trade, while most have shifted to fully electronic trading. Now, under the new measures, only a quarter of the normal number of traders will be allowed to return to work. They must avoid public transport, wear masks, and follow strict social distancing rules with, of course, newly fitted transparent barriers in order to keep people apart. Floor traders will also reportedly have to sign a liability waiver that prevents them from suing the NYSE if they get infected at the exchange. New York City has been hit hard by the COVID-19 outbreak, with some 200,000 cases and more than 20,000 deaths so far. Well, let's get more on this. We're joined by John Terrett in New York now. John, great to have you on the show. Now, the New York Stock Exchange said it was acting out of economic necessity in opening the floor. Why is this reopening so important for the bourse and the country's financial sector overall?
Well, Uche, thank you very much indeed for having me on the program. It is a lovely sunny Tuesday afternoon here in Wall Street with about a couple of hours trading left to go before the closing bell. I think the background to all of this is you have to remember that 38.5 million Americans in the last 9 weeks or so have signed up for first-time unemployment benefit. That means almost 40 million Americans right now are without work. That's about a quarter of the entire workforce. And we don't know, nobody does, how that is going to affect the recovery of this economy in the United States and indeed how it will affect the wider economies around the world. So today, I'm going to stand aside just a second, if I may, and show you the building itself. Today, the New York Stock Exchange is sending a signal to America and the rest of the world. The slogan there you can see very clearly, "Together we are strong," but it goes beyond that. I think the exchange is saying, look, if we can open with all the crowding that we have on the trading floor, then other businesses can open as well. And even the opening bell this morning at 9:30 local time was rung by Andrew Cuomo, who is the governor of the state of New York. Now that's important because Cuomo has been accused repeatedly of delaying wanting to open up the city of New York after the virus for political purposes. We'll leave the politics out of it. The fact that he was on the balcony this morning, I think, speaks volumes as well. And as you said, it will be, at least for a while, a different sort of trading floor. Only 25% of the traders there, all of them wearing masks, taking temperature tests before they go in. Even lunchtime is now regulated. You can only go to the canteen when you're told to go to the canteen, no eating on the trading floor. But you know, the important thing is that the old lady is back, and I think there was a chance that she may not have come back at all had it gone on much longer.
Now, John, majority of the traders will continue working from home as they have been since the virus hit. They say that that has created some major disorder in the financial system, such as a backlog of failed trades, especially with the banking sector. Give us a sense of the stress that this health crisis has caused in the system.
Well, I know a lot of the traders who occupy the floor, there's around 400 of them most of the time, were very, very upset that the exchange had to close. Very upset indeed, because they're used to this collegiate approach where they're all together on the floor, watching each other's reactions, gauging what's going on behind the eyes, all that sort of thing. And they've had to go literally to their basements and do their jobs from their computers at home. And that's just not natural for the people who occupy the trading floor behind me. There have been some real health issues as well. Peter Tuchman, for example, who is known here as the face of the New York Stock Exchange. He's the guy with the big googly, bulging eyes and the long grey hair. Looks like Einstein. He's seen as one of the senior people to speak on the media here. You see his pictures in newspapers all over the world. He was very sick with COVID-19. He said he never felt worse. And one of the security guards here who patrols the outer parameters of Wall Street and Broad Street, where the exchange is, a chap called Bill Jordan, was only 67 years old, and he died of COVID-19. But, you know, the exchange is opening because it feels that there is a real importance in having human reaction when it comes to trading stocks here, even though other bourses around the world have closed their floors down. And a very quick example, if you have a trader representing you on the floor, you have a 10-minute advantage at the end of the day. They can put in bids here between 10 to 4 and 4 o'clock, whereas if you're outside, you have to send your bids in by 10 to 4. That's a real advantage if you're dealing in billions of dollars, and that's why they like to have floor traders still.
Well, how are we seeing investors reacting to this? We know we saw markets rallying this morning. How are we seeing investors reacting to the easing of those lockdown restrictions and, of course, this partial return to normal life?
Well, today, we can only speak. Incidentally, when you look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it is a snapshot. It's a snapshot of how the US economy is doing at any given moment. That's how you should think of it. So today, we're 500 points to the good. It's very much in the green. And that is because of several reasons. First of all, there's progress in vaccines. The reopening of the states is going on all around us. And of course, there were reasonable quarterly earnings for the first quarter. They weren't great, but they could have been worse. We'll have to see what happens in the second quarter. I think it's interesting to point out that the Dow is only 16% away from its all-time high. The NASDAQ less than 5% right now from its all-time high. And I think you have to remember that the markets the world over, but particularly this one, are forward-looking instruments. They don't look back, which is why on a day when you get terrible unemployment figures, the market will often be up. And that's because the traders are thinking, well, okay, what's going to happen next? When will the job come back? When will the recovery be? Possibly the third quarter. We're betting on that. That's the reason. And as I say, I looked about half an hour ago, the Dow was up around 500 points today.
Well, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, John, for that update. That's John Terrett joining us in New York at the New York Stock Exchange as it reopens its floor. Well, let's shift our focus now back to the continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area's launch was postponed by the coronavirus pandemic. However, experts are urging African heads of state not to allow the deal to fall by the wayside. The deal, which was due to be implemented on July 1st, will form the largest free trade area in the world, uniting 1.3 billion people in a $3.4 trillion economic bloc. Now, the deal came after protracted negotiations between leaders of 54 African nations. However, it was postponed in late April in order to avoid distracting leaders as they deal with the pandemic. The continent's key trading partners, China, Europe, and the US, have been blighted by the pandemic. Given the impact of the outbreak on its traditional intercontinental trade routes, intra-Africa trade will be key to getting the region's nations back up and running. Now, South African mobile operators have managed to cope with the increasing internet traffic on their networks since the COVID-19 pandemic forced many people to work from home. Some people have, however, decried the quality and speed of their internet connections. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has the details.
There's been a 40% spike in traffic across all networks, according to one analyst, since the lockdown began.
So it's been a big jump, but I do think that the decision by the communications regulator, ICASA, to provide emergency spectrum to the mobile operators has helped alleviate that to some extent, because they've been able to make use of that additional bandwidth to take some of the pressures off their networks.
The majority of workers who are working from home are using their mobile devices to work, and it's not cost effective or at speeds that they are used to in the corporate environment.
What you're seeing is not just people, middle class people being able to stay and work at home, but many people do not have a dedicated internet connection at home. Sure, the data use has increased. We just don't have any idea how much it's done for the networks. I'm quite sure it's increased their bottom line despite their very generous offerings of more data. And it's the way of the world, isn't it? We now live in a work from home, remote working environment.
COVID-19 will change the way mobile operators in South Africa provide services.
There's a shift, and it's been going on a long time, long before COVID-19 happened, and that's the shift from voice being the primary means by which they generate their revenues to data, and that shift is going to continue, and eventually it'll be the vast bulk of their revenue will come from the sale of data. I think COVID-19, the lockdowns, the work from home measures have only served to accelerate that trend in the short term.
The coronavirus has had an unintended consequence. Workers and businesses are looking at how they operate.
A lot of people are saying, why do I need 2 cars if I'm a 2-car family, if we're all going to work home? A lot of businesses are saying, why do I need offices? So this is the strange new scenario, but the short answer is yes, a lot more data is being consumed, and no, we don't know what the revenue or the business input for the networks has been, but I think we can safely say it's been good.
With so many office workers working from home, these walls are hiding lots of people using lots of data to get their jobs done. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Kenya's Equity Group has cancelled its proposed dividend payout of a total of about $88 million, citing the need to conserve cash in the wake of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is the first time the country's second largest bank by assets has skipped dividend payments since listing on the Nairobi Securities Exchange in August 2006. And South Africa's alcoholic beverage makers are now pushing the government to allow smaller bars to convert into drink collection points when a nationwide ban on the sales of alcohol is lifted next week. The beverage makers argue that allowing taverns in poorer communities to sell alcohol for home consumption will prevent local residents traveling long distances and help reduce illicit sales. And the taxi-hailing company Bolt Technologies has received $109 million in funding from London-based investment firm Naya Capital Management. Bolt says they will use the funding to increase their market share in a sector which has been hurt by COVID-19. Now, the funding moves the company's valuation to $1.9 billion, bringing its total investment amount raised to over $325.9 million since inception. And LATAM Airlines has filed for bankruptcy protection under Chapter 11 in New York City in the United States. The group's subsidiaries and affiliates in Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, and the United States are included in the filing. Affiliates in Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay remain unaffected. LATAM is now undertaking a voluntary restructuring in an effort to handle its debt and reorganize the airline to survive the ongoing coronavirus crisis. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Egypt raises $5 billion in its largest ever bond issuance. And the COVID-19 pandemic drives event organizers in South Africa out of business.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country has raised $5 billion in its largest ever issuance in the international bond market. Now, the issuance was oversubscribed 4 times over, with total bids of $22 billion. It will cover funding needs for 2020 and 2021 fiscal year, as well as the financing needed to combat COVID-19 in the North African economy. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Adel El Mahroui with more.
Building up on the momentum of its fresh $2.7 billion IMF loan, Egypt has successfully tapped a significant Eurobond issuance. The government's preemptive step aims to create a financial buffer as the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic economic forecast remain vague.
Egypt needs these bonds, especially due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our foreign debt exceeds $112 billion, of which $101 billion are in long-term maturities, and $11.3 billion is in short-term dues. There is a huge shortage in foreign currency inflows because of the decline in remittances and tourism. These Eurobonds will preserve the bleed in Egypt's reserves, lift pressure from local debit, and that's why Egypt is offering one of the highest yields in the world.
Egypt's finance ministry said they had issued $5 billion worth of Eurobonds last Friday. They included $2 billion maturing in 30 years at an 8.875% yield, $1.75 billion due in 2032 at 7.625%, and $1.25 billion at 5.75% maturing in just 4 years. It is no wonder why this issuance has witnessed phenomenal appetite. It was more than 4 times oversubscribed.
The interest rate, we managed to bring it down by 50 basis points because it was oversubscribed significantly. If we actually go on a screen to search Eurobonds, we'll find that Egypt is one of the very attractive Eurobonds. I think I was searching the secondary market of the Eurobond of the November issue, and it was completely illiquid, and the rates were 7.5% for the November issuance, and you couldn't even buy it.
This month's Eurobond is Egypt's largest single issuance in the international bonds market. Since 2001, the country has issued Eurobonds a total of 11 times, most of which were in the past 4 years. Every time Egypt taps the Eurobond, it witnesses significant appetite. That gives the government confidence that there is always a backdoor on standby whenever it needs a financial way out of an ongoing crisis. Adel El Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, South Africa's mining production is set to fall by between 8% and 10% this year. Mines across the country were forced to shut temporarily when the COVID-19 lockdown started in late March. The government, however, has since eased the restrictions, with underground mines limited to only 50% of normal capacity. Nonetheless, mining companies in Africa's most industrialized economy have been pushing for a full reopening. They argue that they cannot be profitable at half capacity. Some have withdrawn production and distribution guidance in order to conserve cash, while others have delayed the publishing of their financial statements to first evaluate the impact of this pandemic. While still in South Africa, the country has built a reputation for hosting large-scale events and conferences, attracting thousands and drawing in millions of dollars. But this industry has now shut down in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu exploring how professionals in the events industry are now coping with this global health crisis.
It's been almost 3 months since all exhibitions, conferences, concerts and other events were cancelled in South Africa, a massive blow to the economy. In 2015, the events industry contributed close to $5 billion to the economy and created over 151,000 jobs.
2020 was meant to be a really big year in our portfolio of shows, in our calendar. We had in excess of 10 events planned, including 1 or 2 cross-border events in Africa. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has brought pretty much not just our business and our events, but the whole industry to a standstill here in South Africa, but also globally.
The Mining Indaba, the largest mining industry gathering globally, is held in Cape Town each year. It went ahead in early February, just weeks before the lockdown took effect. But the Africa Travel Indaba, which is usually held in May, had to be cancelled. The event each year draws over 7,000 people.
The hospitality and tourism industry as a whole is deeply affected by the forecast revenues, as majority of the conferences are planned a minimum of 3 months in advance, to a large scale events up to 6 to 12 months in advance.
We obviously have not been able to trade due to the COVID pandemic. And so essentially we've had to close the business and let the team go simply because we cannot travel.
The Sandton Convention Centre, which was the main venue for the 10th BRICS Summit in 2018, is usually booked up for the entire year and normally a year in advance. It has been closed since mid-March.
Sadly, there are many companies who will not be able to survive if our exhibition industry is not allowed to reopen soon. And this is a devastating loss of skill and businesses that several industry sectors thrive on. We bring people into the country to support our local businesses. So our contribution to the GDP is massive.
Well-known DJ Black Coffee hosted the Music is King festival here in December last year. The Ticket Pro Dome is the largest indoor venue in South Africa with the capacity to hold close to 20,000 people. It might be a long time before another concert is held here again. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, China is playing a key role in enhancing the manufacturing capacity of African nations. That has helped many countries on the continent record steady economic growth over the last decade. In Uganda, the Manufacturing Association says the increasing number of Chinese factories is now helping industrialize the country. Chinese investors have established industrial parks in different parts of the nation, and CGTN's Isabel Nakeria tells us more.
Paul Zhang came to Africa 2 decades ago. He lived in Tanzania for 2 years, but when he visited Uganda, he never looked back.
When I arrived to Entebbe, whoa, amazing. Good weather, beautiful lake, and another good thing, people very friendly. Then I decided, I do business here.
Paul runs a chain of businesses in Uganda. They range from real estate to the hospitality industry, but his passion is in manufacturing. He produces a wide range of products from steel to plywood, bulbs, apparel, electricity cables and mattresses.
You know, people sleeping in the, use timber and grass build a house. Me also have question. Paulo Zhang, asking myself, why not to make steel? In China, make everything. They have enough technology, enough equipment. Then I got another friends, come to Uganda, we to do business. Now you can see everywhere, people build a house. You know why? Price. Good quality, also good price. If too expensive, people no money to buy.
A 2019 report by a local research firm, Accord, shows that by the end of 2017, Chinese companies had invested over $4 billion in Uganda. The government offered them free land to set up industrial parks in the central and eastern part of the country, bordering Kenya. The Ugandan president also ordered that investors be given preferential treatment, including tax breaks.
I'm not interested in taxes of factory owners, direct taxes. I'm not interested. Direct taxes. That's why we give you tax holiday of 10 years. You just bring a factory, bring the machines, and start producing.
The same research report by Accord showed that by the end of 2017, 18,000 jobs had been created by Chinese companies for Ugandans. The Trade Ministry says the increase in domestic production from the Chinese factories is significantly cutting down Uganda's import bill, and the locally produced goods are increasing the country's export revenues. But there are general concerns from a section of the public that the government is favoring largely the foreign over local investors.
To accept that to learn, to grow, you have to open up your space. This happened in Singapore, it happened in Malaysia, it happened in Thailand. The Chinese came, and there was initially a pushback, but then they allowed them to settle in. And that's how the countries got a different work ethic. And they started doing things differently. Their manufacturing base transformed radically. So we can do it as a country.
But for now, Paul Zhang is thinking about his next big project, a car assembly plant that will build brand new vehicles for both the Ugandan and export markets. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, Kenyans living abroad sent home $208 million last month. That's a decline of about 9% compared to the $228 million that was transferred in March. However, the cumulative inflows in the 12 months to April were higher at $2.8 million compared to the $2.7 million over a similar period last year. According to data from the Central Bank of Kenya, US and Canada were the top contributors to the diaspora remittances. The report comes at a time when the World Bank had warned that global remittances were projected to decline sharply by about 20% this year due to COVID-19. Now, there's also been an increase in remittance costs, with the global average cost of sending $200 remaining at a high of 6.8% in the first quarter of 2020. Now, in Senegal, shoppers have found one small piece of comfort amongst all the coronavirus chaos that has come in the form of a dive in the price of tiof. This is a fish at the heart of their national dish. But the fishermen and the industries that support them have been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar has that story.
At a market in the northern port city of St. Louis, the streets are flooded with white grouper stock caught off the Atlantic coast. The fish is commonly known as tiof in the local language. Served as a marinated delicacy on a bed of spicy rice, the dish has grown widely popular among the locals in recent years. However, the plummeting of costs in recent weeks, owing to the outbreak of the novel coronavirus, has brought about unforeseeable changes.
When this cursed disease arrived, all borders were closed, so it stopped all exports. Everything we produce, we have to consume. Tiof is extremely expensive for the ordinary Senegalese, and its price has been lowered locally because that type of fish was meant to be for the foreign market. But now it's consumed locally.
Before, chof was $7 per kilo. It was expensive, so as a vendor, it did not work for me. But now at $4 a kilo, I can buy some for my own consumption and sell the rest. It's really more accessible because planes are not flying anymore because of Corona.
High demand from overseas escalated problems for many locals. It saw prices rise steeply, partly due to scarcity, global warming and overfishing by foreign trawlers. But now government emergency measures that will help tackle the spread of COVID-19 pave the way for the sale of the off in local markets.
Now, the chof is much cheaper because it does not sell as easily as before. So whatever amount of money you have, you'll be able to buy some.
Some customers are enjoying the resurgence of the noble fish as it is known in the main coastal cities. But for the artisanal fishermen, business has been disrupted by the government's implemented measures.
We are fishermen. All we know is the sea. We work on the sea. We have departure times, but we don't have specific times for when we come back. We can leave in the morning and come back just before sunset. But now timings have been imposed from 5 p.m. No one is allowed to work. The government should have tried to understand us. As soon as we come back from fishing expeditions, they should have allowed us to sell our catch.
Fishing is an important foreign exchange earner for the country, making up 16% of Senegal's GDP. With the restrictions hampering operations, the fishing industry is reeling with losses estimated in millions.
There is no work anymore. Because of the restrictions, we had to let go of 10 employees. Now we only have 5 people working, and we pay them every month. It's hard. They need to lower the price of electricity and water. Everything is expensive here. We used to work 24 hours a day. Now we barely work for 6 hours a day.
The impact of the coronavirus on Senegal's fishing industry has seen its focus drop 3.9%. Many fear businesses in the sector could fail to recover for a long time. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now. Still to come. German carrier Lufthansa gets a €9 billion bailout from the government. And Greece opens its restaurants and island travel after easing COVID-19 restrictions.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Now, Germany has thrown Lufthansa a €9 billion lifeline, agreeing a bailout that gives Berlin a veto in the event of a hostile bid for the airline. The largest German corporate rescue since the coronavirus crisis struck will result in the government taking a 20% stake, which could rise to 25% plus one share in the event of a takeover attempt, as it seeks to protect thousands of jobs.
Lufthansa is ready to fly again, with the help of the German government, who will take a 20% stake in the company.
A total of €9 billion will be made available to the airline and its 135,000 employees to help the company get through the difficult times we are all now facing.
But the deal requires EU Commission approval. And there is intense speculation that the Commission may force Lufthansa to give up some takeoff and landing slots to reduce unfair competition.
If Lufthansa actually has to surrender slots, this could have a negative impact on its flexibility to re-establish key flight connections from its Frankfurt and Munich hubs.
Irish carrier Ryanair said Tuesday it will contest what it called illegal state aid that distorts competition. Lufthansa says it is losing over $1 million an hour, with most flights grounded due to the coronavirus pandemic. But the German carrier hopes to reopen many holiday travel routes in June, with the continent's spread of the virus slowing for now. German government support for Lufthansa was never really in doubt, given its strategic importance and more than 100,000 employees. However, Berlin has said it won't exercise its voting rights in day-to-day operations, which is seen as a win for the airline. The German government stressed it wants to sell its shares by 2023 at a small profit, it hopes.
The commitment we are preparing for here is just for the time being. When the company is afloat again, the state will sell its shares.
With the German government now even more involved, it's likely to push back hard in Brussels as it tries to help get the airline off the ground again. Ira Spitzer, CGTN, Berlin.
And on to the United States now. The country's Department of Commerce has announced that it will impose new restrictions on Huawei's acquisition of semiconductors. The Chinese telecom giant has slammed the decision and says it is looking for a solution.
This decision is both arbitrary and pernicious and threatens to undermine the entire industry worldwide. The new rule will impact the expansion, maintenance and continuous operations of networks worth hundreds of billions of dollars that we have rolled out across more than 170 countries.
Now, Huawei says it has been committed to complying with all U.S. government rules and regulations since May 16, 2019, when the tech giant was added to the entity list. The new rule will affect communication services for more than 3 billion people who use Huawei products and services worldwide. For now, the Trump administration's new restrictions have not been fully implemented, with a buffer of about 120 days. Huawei is coordinating with its chip suppliers and significantly increasing research and development. Well, let's now turn our attention to ties between Beijing and Washington. China-U.S. trade tensions have been going on now for almost 2 years. The unease between the two economic giants has also spread to other economic areas, including the financial and tech sectors. Let's take a look.
The U.S. Senate recently passed a bill removing rogue Chinese firms from the American stock exchanges in the wake of the Luckin Coffee scandal. The China-based beverage chain received a delisting notice from NASDAQ after the company's chief operating officer allegedly fabricated as much as $310 million in sales in 2019. In addition to Luckin Coffee, analysts say the measure could lead to the removal of 156 Chinese companies, valued at 1.2 trillion US dollars from US exchanges. The Senate action came after the US Commerce Department announced that it would impose additional restrictions on Huawei's acquisition of semiconductors. The new rules would affect communication services for the more than 3 billion people who use Huawei products and services worldwide.
Our business will inevitably be massively impacted. But this past year of practice has given us a thick skin. We are confident that we can find a solution soon.
Some scholars in the US have been calling for anti-protectionism measures.
Now, even those who argue for decoupling, they also know that some of the policies may also cause some damage on the part of the United States. I think we must avoid this kind of a single-minded approach towards a very complicated bilateral relationship, very consequential relationship in our time.
China's finance ministry has announced a new list of 79 US products eligible for waivers from retaliatory tariffs. The waivers will take effect in May 2021. The question now is, can the waivers be a signal of the end of bilateral tensions?
Now, Greeks have welcomed the reopening of coffee shops, restaurants, bars and travel to the islands, which were cut off since the lockdown was enforced more than 2 months ago in order to battle the coronavirus pandemic. Here's Song Yao-chan with the story.
Tables at cafes and restaurants were set apart from each other, and employees wore masks. Spending time at cafes and eating out are among the most popular pastimes for Greeks.
We've missed this. It's psychological therapy for us. Of course, it's important, very, very important.
Retired men traditionally spend their mornings and evenings at a cafeneo or a coffee shop, drinking Greek coffee and chatting about current events.
I was quite depressed because day and night I was in the house. Now they have opened. We can get out and drink a cup of coffee.
This is something quite unprecedented for me. It feels like I'm starting to work for the first time. It feels really strange. Something like this has never happened to me before, and I hope it will never happen again to any of us.
Athens Mayor Kostas Spokoyannis said the food service sector employs 45% of the workforce in Athens, and the capital is preparing for tourists.
Greece has been doing extremely well over these few months. And we are very optimistic about the future, about making sure that we can reopen our economy and send a message around the world that Greece is open and safe. It's a destination where one can enjoy their holiday while at the same time securing their health.
The country is preparing to open up to domestic and international tourism, with year-round hotels and campsites opening on June the 1st. All seasonal hotels will reopen on June the 15th. Travel restrictions to the islands were also lifted, with ferries operating at 50% of their capacity as part of social distancing rules, and wearing a mask on board is also required. International flights will be allowed to land at all Greece's airports on July the 1st. Visitors will be subject to sample coronavirus testing where authorities see fit. Visitors from countries with low coronavirus infection rates will be favored. Song Yao-tian, CGTN.
Now, summer has arrived and Britons can't wait to rush to the beach in the southwest of the country. As the beaches fill up with day trippers, the town has changed its advertising slogan to "Don't Visit Western." Here's John Bever with the story.
Perfect holiday weather. Under normal circumstances, you couldn't ask for a better long weekend in the UK, but things are far from normal. As the beach here in Weston-super-Mare fills up with day trippers, the hospital closed its doors on Monday morning due to the high number of patients with coronavirus. Visitors are legally allowed to travel to this part of southwest England, and the vast majority here were respecting social distancing by staying 2 metres apart from those not in their household. But that gets harder as it gets busier. The town has changed its advertising slogan to "Don't Visit Western," and the mayor has a clear message.
We can't keep you safe in Western at the moment. There are too many people wanting to visit. What we're saying is stay safe, stay away. Come back later in the year when this pandemic is under control and you can have a good time. There are no facilities for you to use. It isn't going to be the best day out.
With good weather for the past week, it's been a similar picture around the UK. Brighton, just one busy spot when the sun came out. Some of those on the front line against the virus are deeply concerned by what they are seeing.
This really scares me. I think this will lead to a fresh spike in the pandemic. People are very much at risk. People are still going to be admitted to hospital, very ill, young people as well. And of those, some people are going to die. And all of these deaths are preventable. If you don't catch the virus, you're not going to die with it.
England is now entering a critical time, with all eyes on infection rates. Lockdown measures were eased here almost 2 weeks ago, and because of the incubation period of coronavirus, we should see what impact that's had on the spread in the coming days. John Beaver, CGTN, Western-super-Mare.
Well, let's head to South Africa now. While many restaurants have had to shut their doors during these tough economic times, award-winning restaurant Massimo's Pizzeria in Hout Bay near Cape Town has once again started delivering food orders to its loyal customers. And the restaurant owners have also opened their hearts by delivering food for free to many needy people in poorer communities. Renee Delcarme reports.
A few months ago, we told you the story of Massimo's Pizzeria as it celebrated the international accolade of being named the best pizzeria in Africa. Now the COVID-19 outbreak has brought major change and uncertainty.
Already in March, before they closed South Africa, we were following Italy. I was following my family in Italy. We knew that the lockdown was the only way to protect us. So we closed even a week before the South African government decided to close. March and April, they were really hard because, we couldn't trade at all. And we still have to pay the rent, we have to pay the staff. I have more than 20 staff.
But Massimo's has a long history of paying it forward by doing good deeds in underprivileged communities, trying to give more to those who have less.
In our restaurant, we have always tried to do a lot for the community, to support the charity. We had a different scheme, raising money or giving free pizzas. So one of the biggest problems when we had to close it was how can we still try to do something good?
Despite the lockdown, they continued cooking their authentic Italian pastas, soups and pizzas for a nearby fishing community, where the coronavirus crisis has worsened issues of poverty and hunger. The restaurant also set up an online fundraiser, which allows them to help another charity buy an extra ton of vegetables for other communities every week.
The initial idea was to raise 5,000-10,000 rands, and it's gone really mad. At the moment we got more than 200,000 rand in offers. And with that money, we have been able to buy every week enough food to cook. On average, we do 200 to 300 meals a week for the community that need it. And there's a lot of need now.
Workers at this local animal shelter also look forward to a daily delivery of Africa's best pizza or pasta, or whatever's on Massimo's special menu of the day. In future, Massimo's Pizzeria hopes to put less emphasis on fine dining, winning awards and doing great, but it hopes to keep serving the hungry and doing good. Renee Delcarme, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, let's move on now and take a look at today's commodity markets. Oil prices were up, supported by growing confidence that producers are now following through on commitments to cut crude supplies, while also fuel demand is picking up with more cars back on the road as coronavirus lockdowns ease. Now, according to comments from Russia, oil output had dropped almost to its target of 8.5 million barrels per day for May and June. Meanwhile, gold prices ticked higher today, but they did moderate as brewing Sino-US tensions over Hong Kong lifted demand for the safe haven metal. However, one of the factors keeping a cap on gold prices is, of course, those easing of lockdown restrictions across the world. Well, let's take a short break now. Still coming up on the show. Tanzanian woodcarvers beat the odds to remain in business amidst a tourism slump.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, in the heart of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, the Mwenge Woodcarvers Market is famous for local artisans who create beautiful and unique wooden items. The market sells wooden masks as well as goods from fabrics to sandals, beaded necklaces and more. Now, the COVID-19 outbreak has kept tourists away, causing low sales as, of course, tourists are no longer coming. But the artisans are coming together to find a way to survive. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has this story.
Wood carving is a blend of imagination, art, and specialized carpentry. And for 30 years, Nyunga Joseph has worked to perfect this craft. Before COVID-19, he mostly sold his pieces to tourists who take wood carving back as souvenirs and gifts, and he used to earn up to $1,200 per month. But since the pandemic hit Tanzania, it's been a fight for survival.
We have been affected in every way, from economically and income. We can't even eat properly. We get meals by the grace of God through small favors.
Since the suspension of international airlines due to COVID-19, the market has lost most of its valuable customers, causing serious impacts for the over 600 local artisans.
Many of the wood carvers here have used the skill they learned decades ago to survive and provide for their families. But since COVID-19 hit Tanzania, they now have been forced to carve out a solution online so as to secure their future.
Formed in 1987, the Association of Tanzanian Wood Carvers was the first to be registered by Tanzania's Art Council. The association has over 700 members in Zanzibar, Arusha, Dar es Salaam, and Tanga. Its management has now decided to open a virtual market website and introduce online payments so artists can share their craft and do sales beyond their locations.
We have placed ads on television and radio so that all wood carvers can register on the association website. We ask them to upload their works so we can sell them online, so as we can reduce the damage we are facing.
But there is hope. The Tanzanian government recently opened its airspace. Tourists aboard Ethiopian, KLM, and Turkish Airlines are expected to land in Tanzania in a few weeks, something that will be beneficial for the market as the country opens its tourism sector following nearly 2 months of lockdown. Nyunga says the government must find a way to direct that traffic to woodcarvers as well.
When these tourists come, they should not just go to Kilimanjaro or only in the national parks. They should come to Mwenge and other areas that sell wood carving based art.
As it stands, Nyunga says the difficulties outweigh the benefit for woodcarvers in the country. It's hoped as the government tries to bring back tourism as responsibly as possible, the odds would improve for the best for woodcarvers. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Now, Burundian refugee Innocent Habyarimana has been making and selling soap since 2015. In order to help prevent the spread of coronavirus, he has now scaled up production and reduced prices so more people can use soap to wash their hands. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with his story.
Innocent Habyarimana is a Burundian refugee living in Kenya's Kakuma refugee camp. For the last 15 years, he's been operating a soap-making business in the camp. When he first had hand washing was crucial in preventing the virus, he did something few businessmen would do.
On my side as a soap producer, first I decided to put on a lower price so that each and everyone will be able to afford the soap.
Fellow refugees, aid workers and Kenyans in the local community buy the products made at his small workshop in Kakuma camp.
Because of this corona, the production was being increased so much because all people now are in need of soap. Currently, because of this coronavirus, the demand which is high, it is hand wash, hand sanitizer and multi-purpose soap.
Kenya is seeing a rise in cases, but none have been confirmed in refugee camps.
Coronavirus affected the world, plus this Kakuma refugee camp. Most of the refugees are fearing so much coronavirus. That is why now you can't find more than 3 people who are in the same place.
Habyarimana has a diploma in chemistry and worked for a chemical company back home. He used those skills to establish a range of products including soaps, bleach and shampoo. He's also making and selling hand sanitizer with aloe vera, which he planted at his workshop and outside his house. The products are certified by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, before we go, let's take a quick look at Africa's currencies today. Kenya's shilling held steady amid some dollar demand from merchandise importers and, of course, the energy sector as the anti-coronavirus lockdown eases and some businesses reopen in the country. South Africa's rand jumped about 1.2% today, and that's after 2 days of losses against the US dollar. The currency was at its strongest since March 27th as a further easing of the country's lockdown inches closer. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.